Just imagine, a cold, rainy morning in the heart of the city. Among hurried cars and umbrellas, a little girl with messy hair, dressed in torn clothes and clutching an old teddy bear, huddles on the wet sidewalk. This is Sofia, only 7 years old, alone in the world, hungry, scared, her heart longing for the mother she lost. On the other side of the glass, inside a luxury car, sits Hugo, a man who has everything money can buy, except the will to live, ever since he lost his own son. 2 worlds apart, separated by a pane of glass fogged over by the rain. Suddenly, Sofia musters up her courage. With trembling hands, she writes on a rain-soaked scrap of paper. "Sir, I just want a father's hug. My mom died. I'm hungry." She sticks it to the window and walks away, convinced no one will notice. But when Hugo reads that note, something inside him breaks. He bursts out, running through the street with tears streaming down his face, desperately searching for Sofia among all the invisible faces that crowd these city sidewalks. What will happen when the two finally meet? Why did that note hit him so deeply? Stick with us until the end to discover how one encounter changed 2 lives forever. Midnight deep in the city seems endless when it's this cold. The wet ground reflects the dull yellow glow of streetlights, everything blurred by a drizzle that just won't quit. Sofia's there, curled up behind an old iron grate, a place nobody bothers with. She clings tightly to what's left of her bear, one-eyed, threadbare, musty, but still her everything. Because who is she without it? She pulls a scrap of cardboard up to her chin, trying to trick the wind. The cardboard soaks through quickly, no protection at all, just a way to hide her face from the world for a few minutes. Her stomach growls, louder than any car horn, deeper than stray dogs barking in the distance. It's been ages since she tasted real bread. She used to feel embarrassed to ask. Now she asks however she can, with a thin voice, waving her bear, tugging at people's sleeves. Almost nobody responds. Just eyes that turn away, hurried footsteps stamping off. Tonight, the cold feels like it's biting, really biting. It stings her feet. No sneakers, just a broken little sandal her mother left behind, and a sock, so what it makes everything worse. Sofia rubs her toes, cups her breath to try to warm them, but it doesn't help. It hurts just the same. She closes her eyes, feels tears fighting to fall, but swallows them. Cry on the street, and you only get weaker. That's what her mom always said, back when there was still a house, the smell of dinner, a soft bed to sleep in, before the hospital. She peeks out from beneath the cardboard, avoiding a nearby puddle, looking up at the sky, barely a sliver between the buildings, all gray. She aches for her mom's lap, the gentle strokes, the soft lullabies sung just for her. She whispers a question, just for herself. Why me, God? No answer, of course. Here, prayers vanish in the roar of buses, distant sirens. The fear of someone coming at night is as big as her hunger. There's always someone shady around, shouting for no reason, rummaging in garbage bags. So she makes herself invisible, hides in the shadows, holds her bear to her chest like a shield. Terrified of faces behind the bars, spitting out ugly words. She trusts no one. If her dad came back, would he take her anywhere? She tries to picture his face, but it's faded. Just remembers the scratchy beard and a strong smell. Not even sure she wants to see him again. She wouldn't sleep if she could help it. But her little body tires so quickly. Eventually she collapses, but her sleep is wet and restless. Every time a car screeches away, she jumps. She hears laughter far away. People who seem to live on another planet. The wind carries the scent of warm bread from a bakery somewhere, and her stomach aches even more, growling loud enough that you'd think the whole world could hear. Sofia thinks of her mother's voice. One day this will pass, darling. Be strong. But time passes and nothing changes. Every night just becomes another wait. Dawn edges in, just a little, on the horizon. People are already moving around, giving her dirty looks as she lies curled up in cardboard. Sofia pulls a scrap of stale bread from the bag, eats it slowly, like a prayer. It tastes strange, but it's better than nothing. The cold only deepens, with no blanket to ward it off. Hunched over, she tries to remember some song her mother liked. She sings quietly, off-key. Only she and the bear can hear. Watching the cars go by, she wonders who those well-dressed, busy adults are, always checking their watches, hurrying through life. Nobody ever stops. Nobody asks her name. Sometimes she wishes she could turn into a gust of wind, a fallen leaf, anything but a girl who's hungry. But deep, deep down, she still hopes something different might happen. A gesture, a word, a look that could warm her inside. She thinks about miracles. Not the movie kind, just something small, like a hug, a warm roll, someone saying, "Come with me, you don't have to be cold anymore." Sofia sighs, feels her throat tighten again. She hugs the bear as if it's a real baby. Promises him, as if someone could hear. "Maybe today will be different, okay? Hold on tight, Teddy." Just then, a car stops at a distance. The sound of doors slamming makes her open one eye, catching a glimpse of a rushing shadow crossing the street. Not for her, of course, not ever. People who don't look to the side, who pretend she's just another piece of wet cardboard on the sidewalk. She shifts so no one will see she's crying. The end of night always feels the worst. The sun still hasn't risen, the cold still lashes, and everyone else already looks ready to start over. Except her. She used to dream of going to school, drawing pictures, having a real backpack. But all of that slipped away when her mother died. She even misses her father's yelling, because at least it wasn't silence. Sofia closes her eyes again and promises she'll wait just a little longer. Just one more morning. Somehow, she believes there's a miracle waiting for her. It's that thin thread of hope that keeps her from giving up. Not the cold, not the hunger, not even her fear of the dark. Even there, curled up against a harsh life, she waits, always waits, for someone to notice. The day dawned gray, as if even the sun was too afraid to come out. Sofia was already awake long before the city really got moving. Her makeshift cardboard blanket was still damp from last night's rain. She rubbed her little hands together, trying to chase away the cold, but it had sunk deep, all the way to the bone. Only hugging her Teddy gave any comfort, and even then, it couldn't warm so much sadness. The street was mostly empty, just a few cars drifting by. Now and then, someone dashed into the bakery, fleeing the bad weather and looking for coffee. Sofia sat, silent and still, facing the comings and goings, her stomach growling, eyes tired. Whenever anyone walked her way, she smoothed her tangled hair, but nobody really saw her. Then a different sound caught her ear. A huge black car, one of those that looks more like a spaceship than a car, pulled up so close she could see her reflection in its shiny window. The engine cut, but there was still that low hum. The door opened slowly, as if it were too heavy. The man who stepped out wasn't just anybody. He wore a dark suit, shoes polished enough to be mirrors. He carried a briefcase and walked hurriedly, trying to shield his clothing from the splashing rain. He didn't look at the ground or the other cars, least of all at Sofia and her grimy bear in her lap. He just stared ahead, stiff and cold, as if refusing to see anyone. His face was striking, but not for its good looks. Serious, almost handsome, but weighed down by a sorrow that clung to his eyes. Not anger, not rush, just emptiness. He looked burdened by everything, even his expensive suit. And for a moment, when the bakery door opened and light hit his face, Sofia saw something she'd never seen in any grown-up before. He was there, but it was like he wasn't really anywhere. She tried to imagine what his life was like: warmth, food, a bathroom just for him, but she couldn't. That gleaming car was too far from anything in her world. Even so, the image of that man stuck in Sofia's head. She watched, hoping for a glance, a gesture, anything. But Hugo just passed by like a shadow, not stumbling, not dodging, not seeming to care at all about puddles. Sofia watched him disappear into the bakery. She tried counting the seconds it took him to walk down the pavement. She thought his heavy steps might scare the old tiles. And she noticed how his face didn't change, not when greeted by the baker, not at the smell of fresh bread curling out the door. It was a strange silence that came off his body, not the cars, not the rain. It was as if, inside, there was nothing left. Sofia's stomach tightened again. It wasn't just hunger. It was the feeling of being invisible to people you most needed. She wanted to run up to the man, tug on his jacket, and ask if he'd ever met his own mother, if he knew what it was to wake up alone. But courage wouldn't come. Someone tossed a coin far from where she sat, and the clatter jolted her back. She fixed her eyes on the parked car, spotless as the rain dotted its dark window. She wondered if that man really saw anything at all, looking at life from inside so much luxury. Sometimes Sophia liked to make up stories. In her eyes, Hugo could be a disguised magician, or an important police officer, or even the owner of all the toys in the shop next door. But a part of her heart said he was just another broken adult, like so many others, who didn't know how to smile for real and only pretended to be alive. When the bakery door swung open again, Sophia saw Hugo come back, head down, clutching a bag of bread. An old man waved from afar, trying to smile, but Hugo just gave a curt nod, eyes still averted. Back in his car, before turning on the engine, he sat for a while gripping the steering wheel, staring ahead as if fighting with his own thoughts. Sophia saw something in him no one else would. Watching him, she imagined that inside this big, strong, immaculately dressed man there might be a pain like hers. Not exactly the same, but the sort that makes you forget how to laugh. Then hunger gnawed at her again. The wind gusted, carrying the smell of fresh bread and stirring up the complaints of her empty stomach. Sophia hugged her bear tighter. For a minute, she wanted badly for the man in the car to look back, just to see if he, too, missed someone. But the car drove away in silence, taking Hugo's story with it. And Sophia was left behind, wondering if, one day, anyone would want to truly see her. Sophia stayed sitting on the sidewalk, body aching from the cold, her stomach begging for anything since the night before. The sky was that deep, forbidding gray, and the puddles in the street muddied with drizzle that never let up. She drew her knees in tight, pressed her bear close, trying to find warmth in the corner of the wall, but there was no warm corner for someone who lives outside. Morning brought crowds of adults, umbrellas darting, car horns blaring, the whole city swallowed by hurry. Only she seemed stuck in time. Another day of icy wind on her face, another day of scolding from people who never met her eyes. More, "I don't have anything for you," or "get a job," as if she even knew what that meant. Even begging for change was becoming nearly impossible in this city. The shame hurt her chest for real. It wasn't just hunger, it was real loneliness. That's when a different ache took hold. Not just a tired body. Her soul wanted out of this hole. Sophia looked at her teddy, the nameless friend, almost bald from so many hugs. She held the toy to her ear, like when she was little and her mom would whisper secrets, and for a moment stayed very still in the silence between car horns, just listening to the sound of tires splashing water on the sidewalk. She shrank down even more, fishing for leftover coins in her tattered pocket, but only found a crumpled scrap of paper. For a second, she wanted to throw it away. It was just trash. But touching that half-soaked scrap felt different. A foggy idea began to take shape. If no one listened to her voice, maybe they'd listen to words on paper. She spent a long time thinking of what or how to say it. Ideas rose and fell. Nothing seemed like it would help. She almost wanted to cry, but tears didn't come so easily anymore. She wiped her dirty face with the sleeve of her torn sweatshirt, took a deep breath, and searched for her pencil. Just a stub, flattened and worn down, the kind you keep as treasure. With real effort, Sophia started scratching the pencil over the paper. It wasn't easy. Her hand shook worse than ever. She didn't know if that was from cold, hunger, fear, or everything at once. The words came slowly. "Sir, I just want a father's hug." She had to stop over and over because the pencil kept snagging, wouldn't write right. She looked up at the sky, trying to remember how her mother's handwriting looked. Her chest hurt, the ache of missing her so strong, she almost gave up. But she looked at her bear, petted his ear, rallied herself, and went back to the page. "My mom died. I'm hungry." The last line blurred. The pencil smeared because her hands were wet from rain and sweat. She tried to wipe the mark, but only made it worse. The paper was stained, but still readable. She didn't care about neatness. She just wanted that man in the car to read it. Maybe he would understand. Maybe he was the only one who'd see something in her. When she finished, she spent a long time staring at that note, ashamed of what she'd written, as if laying her heart bare to a stranger was wrong. But at the same time, a tiny hope began to flicker. Maybe today, maybe miracles started just like this. Sophia held the paper in both hands, like it was something sacred. It wasn't just a note, it was a silent cry. No one saw her shrivel away at night, facing hunger and fear, wishing only for warm arms, for a familiar scent. Her heart thudded so loud, she could almost hear it outside her chest. With every drop of rain, the page felt heavier. She thought of throwing it away again. She thought of hiding it, waiting for another day, because shame would come in a wave, nearly drowning her. But she remembered nights pretending her teddy was the dad who never returned. The longing for her mom. The loneliness beneath the awnings stained with garbage and cigarette smoke. The words on her note were a last chance. Seemed like the smallest door in the world, but still a door. She got up slowly, first on her knees. She looked around, still fearing others' eyes. But nobody noticed the girl filthy with rain and sorrow. She grabbed her teddy, kissed its fabric forehead, the way she did when she needed courage. It was all she had to talk to, all she had left. She saw the black car parked in the morning mist, shining. Sofia shivered, not scared of the rich man, but of the emptiness inside that car. It reminded her of her own emptiness, though a different kind. Because sometimes, you can feel the sadness in the eyes of someone rushing past. She looked at the note one last time, ran a finger over it, tried to neaten the smeared writing, but nothing would fix it now. This was it. The plea of someone with nothing left to lose. Just something simple. A father's hug, that's all. For a moment she nearly gave up. But right then, on the cold street corner, something inside her was louder. Like her mother's voice telling her not to give up, to try again, no matter how slim the chance. Sofia took a deep breath, pulled her torn coat tighter over her thin body, gripped her teddy in one hand, the note in the other. Cold wind lashed her face, her hands numb, legs tired from sleeping on the hard ground. She took the first step, thinking that maybe, just maybe, today would be the day something changed. Sofia waited by the man's car parked out front of the bakery, watched from the edges, trying not to draw attention. His window was misted, like it wanted to guard the world outside. His suit was dark, elegant, like something from another life. She shrank inside her thin sweatshirt, cold drops running down her neck. The city clattered with horns, rushed voices, people shielding themselves from the rain with bags, folders, whatever they could find. Sofia had nothing but her teddy, soggy and gray but still soft where it wasn't torn. She stood a moment, feeling the weight of the folded note in her hand. It seemed to burn her fingers, it mattered so much. She looked at the gray sky, breathed deep. There was a knot in her belly. Hunger and fear knotted together. Her fear was someone seeing her. Or worse, no one seeing her at all. No one caring. But today, she'd decided she wouldn't give up so easily. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it might leap out of her shirt. It wasn't just the cold. It was the embarrassment of asking for a hug, the shame of being so small in a world this big. And hope, too. That stubborn hope that wouldn't leave, no matter how hard everything was. When no one seemed to be looking, Sofia crept closer to the car. She stepped in a puddle. The sound was barely a whisper. She tried not to tap the window too hard. Her fingers wet, wrists dirty. She pressed her paper to the driver's side glass, right where it would be visible. She smoothed the corners as well as she could, but rain was already smudging the ink. Some words started to run, dancing in the drops. The car was beautiful, spotless, the scent inside something expensive. Sofia caught a glimpse of her own reflection, a thin face, streaked cheeks, wide eyes too big for her age. Hair plastered to her forehead, one strand behind her ear. She imagined what it would be like to sit a second in that dry seat, to melt against something safe, to rest from the streets, from all the stares. Before anyone could see, she slipped away. Her heart was still pounding, but now came a spark of courage, twisted up with desperate hope. She didn't dare cry. The rain washed her face, hiding tears and cold together. She hid by a utility pole, back to the wind, hugging her teddy in search of warmth. She desperately wanted the man to read it. Maybe he wouldn't understand. Maybe he'd throw it out. She was used to indifference by now. But today, she needed to try. This was the last note she would write. Not because she was out of paper, but because she was scared to believe again. The wind sent scraps of cardboard skittering along. Her whole body shook with cold. Her stomach begged for food, but she stood still, hardly daring to blink, watching to see if he'd noticed the note. She felt ashamed, like she'd poured out a huge secret to a stranger, and wanted nothing more than to disappear before she could hear any scolding or be chased off, like always. People rushed by, not noticing the wet little girl or the small piece of paper stuck to the fancy window. Sofia thought of her mom, who wiped her tears with warm hands, whispered promises that things would get better. Now it was up to her to promise herself she wouldn't give up. that miracles came to those who kept trying. She closed her eyes a moment, squeezed her bear tight, nearly to bursting. She whispered softly, nearly a secret, "If he doesn't come, tomorrow I'll try again. Just one more time." Her words disappeared in the wind, but she felt a scrap of hope tangled up with her fear. She stared at the bakery, picturing the man inside, laughing, talking, picking out treats she'd never tasted. She imagined his big hand picking up the note, reading it slowly. Would he understand her crooked letters? Would he laugh, feel offended, or just ignore it like everyone else? Suddenly, a horn blared behind her, scaring Sofia. She took a step back, stumbled, but didn't drop her bear. Her chest felt tight. Inside the car, the note was smeared, but the most important line was still clear: "I just want a father's hug." So little, and yet so impossible at the same time. By the way people always skirted around her, Sofia knew a hug was a rare gift for someone living on the streets. Hunger hurt, but the empty ache in her chest was worse. The rain picked up, her clothes growing heavier, sticking to her small frame. Sofia looked around, searching for an answer nobody had. She was terribly afraid of being scolded, but even more afraid of being invisible. She stood there, wrapped in cold and noise and the smell of bread, waiting, in silence, for the first kind gesture that might save, even for just one day, the girl and her tired heart. Hugo walks briskly down the sidewalk, yanking at his wet suit jacket and making that face of someone who hates the feel of soggy cuffs. The rain is pounding, soaking his shoulders, trickling through his neatly combed hair, at odds with the impatient look in his eyes. Car engines, horns, people huddling under awnings. Hugo pays them no mind, just wants to get off this street, away from puddles and the cold wind crawling down his expensive collar. By the time he gets to his car, he curses under his breath because his key fob almost slips from frozen fingers. He spits out a swear, sighs, never noticing the little girl across the street watching from under her hood, clutching her battered bear. Sofia is already lost to the crowd, trying to forget the cutting cold in her chest and her stomach. The door unlocks with an electronic chirp. Hugo gets in, wipes his face dry, tosses his bags in the back seat. He barely even notices the piece of paper stuck to his window, right by the mirror. At first, he thinks it's a flyer or some parking notice. He's so used to tuning out anything from outside, anything not part of his world, that he almost rips it off without looking. His hand goes to it, nearly crumpling the soggy, crooked note. But the handwriting stops him. No, he's not imagining it. The letters are shaky, some capitals, some lowercase, a line sliding too far to the left. He pauses, frowning. For a second, all he hears is rain drumming the windows, the muffled growl of the car off, and the sharp smell of bread from his bag. The damp page flutters in the draft sneaking in through the gap. Hugo breathes in deeply, impatient, but something makes him slow his hand. His thumb smooths the wet paper, touches at the torn, folded edge. The writing is so innocent, so raw. It doesn't belong in the cold luxury of his car or next to his expensive wristwatch. He reads it. His throat goes dry instantly. Just a few words. He reads them again in his mind, as if he'd misunderstood. "Sir, I just want a father's hug. My mom died. I'm hungry." That's it. Short and simple, like the rain, like the truth. Hugo's chest tightens. A pain, deep and strange, right where he thought he couldn't feel anything anymore. His eyes fix on the note. The paper trembles in his thick fingers. He tries to breathe slow, but it doesn't work. There's a heat rising in his stomach, a breathless feeling like a punch he can't recover from. For a moment, self-loathing floods him. The meetings, the endless spreadsheets, the man who became so closed, so gruff, so alone. He blinks hard, tries to swallow it, but it's no use. Out of nowhere, tears spill free, completely out of control. They come in a way he hasn't felt in years. Not even at his own son's funeral did he cry like this. It's as if the rain is leaking into the car, but it's him. His wet face isn't just from the storm. He presses the paper to his chest, as if it could shield someone, or hold in a pain that feels not only like the girl's, but somehow his, too. Suddenly his hands are shaking. He hates it, but can't stop. All around, cars pass, horns blare, the city blurs through foggy glass. And Hugo feels loneliness in a brand new way. It's not just his anymore. There's no going back to the fortress of silence he built around himself. That girl, asking for a father's hug, brings everything back. The funeral, his son's empty room, holiday dinners and silence, the huge table with only a cold coffee cup. All that anguish and shame, the aching for something he didn't even know still lived inside his heart. His vision blurs. He wipes his face on the back of his hand, trying to pull himself together, but he can't. He breathes hard, almost gasping. A part of him wants to run, turn the key, drive home, pretend nothing happened. But it's as if the ice wall he's carried all these years has started to crack right there, slowly, with every little word from that note. He catches himself glancing around, breath caught in his throat, a sudden urgency. He thinks, where is she? That girl. Could she still be here? He peers through the fogged glass, heart pounding, as if he's seeing his own little boy waiting for him outside the office all over again. Rain pounds everything, relentless, without mercy, as if rubbing in his face just how alone he is, how the world out there is made up of invisible, cold, hungry children. And Hugo realizes, in a slow, painful way, that he can't just watch anymore, can't pretend that pain slipped right past him. Not this time. The wet paper crumples in his hand, and he feels, for the first time in years, a sudden urge to run, to find someone. The car, the suit, his pride, all become pointless burdens. It's just him and those words, echoing in his mind, asking for tiny things that always seem so simple to him. The tears won't stop falling. Each one feels heavier than the last, so much pent up for so long. The whole world shrinks down inside the car, just the noise of the street, the rain, the lost childhood. Hugo realizes, without quite understanding, that something inside him is broken, and, at the same time, some old hope is slowly waking up, afraid, but alive. He decides, doesn't think twice. He will get out of the car, soaked or not, awkward or not caring what anyone thinks. Because, in that moment, nothing matters but finding whoever wrote those trembling lines, who asked for what he's denied himself most, a hug. Rain still streaked the windows. Hugo held his breath, closed his fist around the damp note, and stood there for a second, feeling the discomfort of his suit stuck to his skin, but none of it mattered. All he knew was he needed to see that girl. Now, there was no planning, no logic, just urgency, and a pain mingled with hope, in the messiest, most human way imaginable. Without thinking, he tossed his briefcase onto the passenger seat. The umbrella stayed there too, forgotten. He just opened the door and got out, crashing into the downpour as if waking to a world he'd forgotten to notice. His heel slipped on the curb. He almost fell, but kept going, looking left, right, to the corners where little kids are always invisible to those in a hurry. The wind blew cold. The rain got heavier and soaked everything, blending with the hot tears streaming down his face. He couldn't even tell what was sweat, what was a tear, what was just the sky washing it all away. People ran out of the bakery with bags and newspapers over their heads, eyeing the drenched man in the expensive suit yelling in the street, as if he'd lost something that was never his. "Girl," he called, voice caught, nothing like the commanding voice from meetings. "Girl." He stopped at the mouth of the first alley, placed a hand on the cold wall to keep steady. Suddenly he noticed the chill, seeping through his dress shirt all the way to the bone. But a strange courage shimmered inside. The note was still there, crumpled, almost falling apart in his hand. He looked at the people and the gray sky, feeling the weight of that simple plea. "I just wanted a father's hug." He asked a street vendor selling coffee, a face wrinkled and eyes tired. "Have you seen a little girl with a teddy bear? Alone? Probably about 7 years old." The vendor just shook his head. Hugo barely noticed how out of breath he was until his chest burned. He kept walking, searching every cardboard box under awnings, by the shutters of closed stores, near the railings. Every child's face looked like hope, and a punch to the gut. But none of them were Sofia. The sound of passing cars sent puddles splashing halfway up his trouser legs. A bus honked. Someone yelled at him to get out of the street, but Hugo barely heard. He was submerged in one thing only, finding that girl. In every alley, the smell of wet trash and stale bread mingled with his expensive cologne, which now meant nothing. He found himself thinking, between steps, about the last time he ran like this, probably when his son was still alive, running for the elevator together, laughing in the rain just for the fun of it. Back then it wasn't necessity, it was joy. Now all his joy had slipped away until he read that scrawled note. Beneath a broken overhang, he saw a group of skinny boys hunched together, sharing a tiny bag of snacks. He approached, showed the note, tried to describe Sofia. They just stared, some suspicious, others indifferent. One mumbled he'd seen a girl near the newsstand, but she always disappeared fast, scared of adults. Hugo's heart kicked into overdrive again. He thanked him in a whisper and pressed on. The rain grew heavier now, his hair plastered, suit glued to skin, hand trembling, and the note, more crushed than before. He realized it had been ages since he felt his heart beat so strong and so alive. The fear of not finding her, the regret, the urge to fill that hollow in his chest, mixed with a promise. If he found Sofia, nothing would be the same. He looked straight at the old newsstand. Its lights flickered, a sad song played inside, and almost no one was around. He strained to see beneath the awning, hunting shadows for the smallest sign of a stuffed bear or a pair of wide, frightened eyes. The rain finally let up a bit, but everything was soaked already. From a distance, he might have looked like nothing but some rich madman, lost in the street, yelling like a desperate boy after someone he shouldn't even know. But up close, you'd see a man stripped of all his armor, not just his clothes, but his defenses, his walls, that wounded pride that's kept him frozen for so long. He called again, voice now on the verge of breaking. Sofia? Sofia? It's me, the man from the car. I'm sorry, please. His face, hardened by years of pain, was now open, vulnerable, eyes red. No one expected to see a billionaire this way. He felt ashamed, yes, but it was nothing compared to the urge to find Sofia. That was smaller than his fear of losing her forever to the city, like he'd lost his son to fate. No answer. No one came. Still, he kept calling, darting from sidewalk to sidewalk, checking under benches and behind walls. Until he stopped, closed his eyes, and quietly asked for a little luck. Because, in that moment, he realized, someone so hungry for a hug should never be left behind. And deep down, he knew he was chasing not just her, but himself, a lost piece of his own heart he never expected to feel beat again. The street felt colder in the fine drizzle, you know? Gray sky overhead, puddles growing on the asphalt, people shuffling along at their own pace, eyes on the ground. The honking carried from far away, blending with the soft patter of rain drumming on cellars' tarps. But there, in that stretch of sidewalk, everything suddenly seemed to pause. Huddled behind a closed magazine stand, Sofia crouched, almost hiding from everything. The cold, the hunger, the rain, the eyes of strangers. Her old teddy bear was crushed tight against her chest, almost colorless, but still wearing the shape of a hug. Sofia's hair clung to her face, soaked, and she tried to pull her torn sweatshirt over her bony knees, but it didn't warm her at all. Her gaze darted from the ground to the cars, as though looking for a way to disappear, fear peering out from the corners of her eyes. That's when Hugo appeared, breathless, suit-drenched, looking like he was halfway between this world and another. He kept glancing around, quietly asking strangers, "The little girl, did you see a small girl, curly hair like this?" And no one really answered, everyone minding their own business. His face was different now, not just worry, but a wild kind of hope mixed with despair. When he finally saw Sofia, stopped a few meters away, the world froze for a few heartbeats. He took a deep breath, and it came out choked. In his eyes you could see something you'd never expect from a man so serious, so rich. The overwhelming urge to cry, and to never let that girl go. "Sofia," he called, softly, as if afraid he'd scare off a bird. She didn't even quite understand. No one had ever said her name like that before, with the care of someone who remembers, of someone who wishes her well. Sofia's eyes widened, and she let out a faint, "Is it me?" Barely a whisper, stepping away. It wasn't just shock. It was the distrust of someone who's been pushed aside too often. Her fingers squeezed her bear so tightly you had to feel sorry for it. Hugo knelt down, slow, lowering himself to her height right there, suit and all, knee on the dirty ground. His hair matted to his forehead, his hands shaking as he tried to find the right posture, the right distance. For a moment, he just stared at Sofia, as though hoping time would turn back. He opened his arms, gently, lips trembling like someone fighting real tears. His voice came out shaky but filled with a gentleness that caught the heart by surprise. "Can I give you the hug you asked for in your note?" Sofia's eyes grew even wider. No one ever asked if they could. Things were always taken from her, life always pushing through without a word. The silence between them grew heavier. The rain pattered behind. A truck honked far away. She looked at Hugo's open arms, at his tear-filled eyes, then at her bear, as if asking it what to do. Her heart hammered so loudly it seemed the whole street would hear. She'd never been given a real hug, not here, on this corner. Her face showed the struggle, the urge to run far away, and at the same time that tiny hope that refuses to die, even after everything. She inhaled, full of fear, hunger, cold, and a small bravery that only children can carry without knowing. Slowly, she let go of the wall as if she were about to leap into icy water without knowing how to swim, and crept closer. Her feet splashed softly on the wet ground. Her hand never let go of the bear for even a second. When she pressed into the hug, Hugo wrapped his arms around her so gently it seemed he was afraid she might break. He stayed on his knees in the rain, letting the umbrella drop beside him, not caring about the suit or the stares from passers-by. The tears came hard, not just hers, but his, too. Hugo cried quietly, shoulders shaking with silent sobs, and Sofia. She finally let out tears pent up for so long, head bowed, hiding her face against his chest, the bear squashed between them. It wasn't an ugly cry. It was suffering turned to relief, the cry of someone who's finally found shelter after too many nights on the street. People sidestepped as they passed. Some glanced. Others didn't notice the miracle unfolding on that lonely stretch of pavement. But inside that hug, there were only the two of them. All the city's noise faded to background for a peaceful kind of silence, a pause to breathe. Hugo whispered in her ear, almost shy. "I promise, you'll never be left alone again. Never again." Sofia didn't answer. She didn't need to. She just held on, wrapped in his embrace, feeling for the first time the warmth of someone who didn't want to hurt her, breathing in the scents of rain and expensive cologne, sweat and relief, his heart beating with hers. Slowly her trembling faded, and her crying became only heavy breaths. Hugo didn't let go. He stayed there, running his hand gently through her tangled hair, staring up at the gray sky, and quietly thanking life for bringing him this lost girl. It was just a hug, but for them, it was everything. There, in the cold, they found warmth. In the middle of the city's chaos, a hush of peace settled. Not a soul passing by had any idea what that little scene meant. But for Sofia, it was the first father's hug the world had ever offered her. And for Hugo, maybe the beginning of a new life he never even knew he wanted. Beneath all that rain, people hurried along, stepping over puddles, shielding their faces with plastic bags and bright umbrellas. The clatter of drops on metal, cars, the soaked pavement, merged with honks and the distant call of a corn vendor at the corner. In the middle of all that rush, Sofia stood still again. Hugo's hug had just happened, but already a cold, gnawing fear crept in. Was it just a dream, or the rain playing tricks on her tired mind? Hugo knelt down slowly beside her, soaked, not caring about his pant cuffs or wild hair. He reached out a hand towards Sofia, trying to look calm, but his eyes shone with that kind of humanity he'd forgotten for years. Sofia looked at the outstretched hand, then at his face, searching for any sign of a lie. She saw so much ugliness in the eyes around her. Hunger, scorn, hurry, that trusting someone, anyone, let alone someone so well-dressed and out of place, seemed impossible. "Come, sweetheart, let me take you somewhere warm, with hot food and a soft bed." His voice was low, roughened by emotion. Sofia felt a knot twist in her belly. She wanted to trust him, but terror was bigger. How many times had someone promised and vanished? How often had she been given food only for a harsh hand to come after, or a disgusted look, or a door slammed in her face? She took a tiny step back, squeezing the bear until its stuffing crackled. Her face hardened, eyes shining with old tears and a fear that would never leave. Hugo noticed. He stopped where he was, lowered his eyes, and breathed deep. He didn't insist, didn't coax her with just a moment. He stayed there, on her time, letting rain trail down from his collar, his whole life trembling inside him. "I promise. I won't hurt you. I'm not leaving. And most of all, I won't lie to you. You don't have to come if you don't want. But if you do, it's only to get warm, eat, rest. Is that all right?" The way he spoke, looking her in the eye, unhurried, without demands, seemed to open a tiny crack in the thick wall life had built inside Sofia. You could see her wanting to run, to duck into the market, hide behind the stand, and become invisible again. But something in this man's face held her, even trembling. She nodded slowly, in silence, as if agreeing, but full of doubts. You could hear her belly rumbling quietly with hunger. She tried to hide it, scrubbed her dirty nose on the sleeve of her torn jacket, and stared at the floor. Her shoe was ripped. The toe poked out, blue with cold. The icy wind against her leg made her shiver, even with the bear clutched close. Hugo got up slowly. He offered his arm, but didn't push. Sofia edged over a little sideways, gripped his hand like someone grabs a fraying rope, testing if it'd hold. It took her a few seconds to decide to hold on, and when she did, it was so tight it almost hurt. Hers was a small arm, all bone, but strong with fear. They started walking, slow, Hugo going carefully, as if afraid one wrong move would break the fragile trust budded between them. He matched his stride to her tiny steps, never hurrying. At every corner, she peered suspiciously, always scouting for a way out, some hint of danger. The car waited nearby, big and black, windshield wipers lazily ticking. To Sofia, it looked like a spaceship. She hesitated again at the door, looked up at Hugo. His eyes were hollow, on the verge of collapse, yet pulsing with a fierce desire to stay put. He opened the door, signaled for her to climb in first. Sofia clung tighter to the bear, set just her right foot in, as if testing icy water. Then she entered, curled up, holding her toy so tight her knuckles whitened. Hugo slid in beside her, careful, moving quietly so as not to startle her. He closed the door gently, muffling the sounds outside, leaving only the hiss of the heater on the leather seats, the drift of expensive cologne mingled with rain, and the heavy silence of two people who've both lost so much. He reached for the seatbelt, offered it to her. Sofia looked, took hold of the ends, but didn't know what to do. She'd never needed it in anyone's car. He showed her gently, touching nothing, how it worked. Like this, see? Sofia watched, learned, did it herself. You could glimpse the name Sofia, stitched in faint old thread inside her dress. Hugo saw, swallowed hard, felt his heart tremble. On the way, Hugo turned on the heater. Sofia fixed her gaze out the window, silent, her mind perhaps wandering to her mother, or simply trying to work out whether this was a dream, or if tomorrow she'd be back on the sidewalk. The car rolled slowly down city avenues, lights flickering on the glass, horns fading behind. Even without a word, the silence inside was different, tense, but the beginning of something. She held onto his arm, wouldn't let go, as if checking if this was real. He didn't let go either, and though afraid, it was as if an invisible thread had linked them on this night, when every heartbeat felt like a miracle. The mansion gates swung open almost soundlessly, only the hiss of wet tires echoing in the wide drive. Sofia watched everything, bear hugged to her chest, hair still damp from the rain plastered to her forehead. Her little palms, dark with dirt, squeezed her old toy so hard her fingers shook. They climbed in through the garage, through a side door all glass, so clear she could see her own face reflected back, round and wary, eyes huge with fear. As soon as she entered the living room, she stopped. Hugo didn't notice at first, so used to all that silence. She smelled the sharp tang of clean floors, perfumes she didn't know, the scent of food warming somewhere far away. Everything was so big, her gaze didn't know where to land. The chandelier above cast light in every corner. Everything looked expensive, new, beautiful, and cold. There was no noise of children, no TV or pans clanging, no laughter, just the tick-tock of a clock and, now and then, a faraway rumble of thunder. She hung back, pressed into a corner, unsure whether to go farther in or just bolt out the door. Hugo set his keys on the counter and glanced around, looking for the girl, but she'd stayed behind the sofa, half-hidden, hugging her bear. He tried to smile, a crooked, shy thing, but nothing came, just a tired sigh. In that moment, he remembered his son, how the house used to be noisy, voices echoing in the hallway, toys scattered everywhere. "It's all right, Sofia. You can sit, or If you want. There's food," he said, gently, uneasy. She didn't answer. Her body trembled as if holding down tears, but she just stood there, clutching her patched bear even tighter. In her eyes you saw fear, doubt, longing for something far away, as if nothing there could possibly be real. An older woman came in, bringing a tray of hot soup, bread, and a glass of milk. Steam soared up at once, thickening the air with the scent of Grandma's kitchen. Sofia bit her lip and stared at the soup, stomach growling, but hesitated. It was as if it was too much for her, somehow, like she didn't deserve to eat there, like she was stealing something. She perched on the chair's edge, bare on the table before her, eyes constantly lowered, peeking sideways to check if this was really allowed. She lifted the spoon with trembling fingers, spilled a bit, the clink of metal on china ringing out in that enormous, empty room. Hugo watched in silence. Every small gesture of hers broke something inside him. He remembered how many times he'd handed food to his own children with barely a thought, never caring if they wanted soup or rice or fries. It had all been automatic before, the life of someone who had everything. Now, to see this wary, skinny child fighting between hunger and the fear of taking up space, it hit him in ways he'd never felt. He wanted to reach out, stroke her hair, but at first, he didn't have the courage. He was afraid to startle her, afraid she'd remember something bad. So, he sat there, silent, a pang squeezing his chest. After dinner, she went to bathe with the woman. Warm steam billowed from the bathroom when she returned, swaddled in a towel bigger than her, wearing pajamas that covered her feet. She curled up on a giant sofa, hugging one end to herself, staring at her clean hands as if she didn't recognize her own body. She picked up her bear again and clutched it. The house's silence was different from the streets. No gunshots, horns, shouting, but still a gnawing emptiness. In that silence, a sharp longing bloomed. She thought of her mother, the way she sang quietly on cold nights, sharing their blanket and stale bread. She wondered if she could really stay here, if it was wrong to feel a tiny bit of relief now. Whether her mother would be happy or angry, if someone was watching from above, seeing their girl in all this luxury, so far from the street smell. Her eyes started to fill with tears, silent now. She tried to hold them back so she wouldn't bother anyone, but Hugo saw. It hurt to watch. It was like seeing his own son, that boy with bright eyes and messy hair, who'd cried in secret too. The only difference was his son had always had a father's arms waiting for him. Hugo felt a weight on his back, a huge guilt for all the years spent shut away, counting money, hiding from the world instead of caring for it. He realized how much a child's laughter was missing in the echo of those walls. The clock marked every second of that silence, tick-tock taunting him for never seeing it before. He sat down carefully, keeping a bit of distance, hands folded in his lap. He wanted to apologize to the boy he lost, to Sofia's mother, for all the time he'd denied love because he was too busy, too sad, too wrapped in his own pain. Sofia wiped her face quietly. She didn't ask for anything, barely said a word, but gave him a sideways look, as if she wished for comfort but didn't know how to ask. So Hugo, without thinking much, just opened his arms, inviting her in. After a second, ages for him, she came. Slowly, she came close and rested her head on his chest. He felt her crying against him, smelled the soap in her hair mixed with that lingering scent of the street. In the middle of that immense silence, he realized it was possible to start again, and maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for either of them. The trouble didn't take long to start. On the internet, in the news, in the family group chat, it seemed the whole world suddenly discovered Hugo had taken an orphan girl into his house. No one wanted to understand. They just repeated the same things over and over, like broken records. That's dangerous. He shouldn't get involved in stuff like that. That girl's going to be trouble. Some said even worse, things that truly hurt. Gossip from neighbors, people pointing on the street, photos taken from afar. Hugo never cared about being seen before, but now it was different. Now it cut deeper because it involved her. Inside the house, tension was a heavy blanket no one could shake off. Sofia listened more than she spoke. She picked up fragments of conversations behind closed doors, hurried whispers. Things like, he's lost his mind. This isn't normal. Sofia doesn't even know how she got here. There were suspicious looks from the maid, pointed texts on the lawyer's phone, worry from people who'd never once thought about Sofia lost out on the street. The mansion's emptiness now felt a little less, but the coldness of the grown-ups hurt somewhere new. Sofia tried to walk quietly along the edges of the room, clutching the stuffed bear that had gone lopsided after too many nights on the sidewalk. She pretended not to hear anything, but she couldn't fool her churning stomach or the tightness in her chest brought on by this new, strange feeling. It was as if for every cruel word spoken out there, it became less likely that Hugo's embrace would last. She was afraid to believe. In her mind, she whispered softly to her mother, "Am I going to stay? Will they want me to leave?" Her eyes searched every face for signs of threat, as if expecting rejection was just part of life by now. At the other end of the house, Hugo felt everything in his own suffocated way. He'd never been the type to cry in front of anybody, but now, each time someone doubted the good he was trying to do, his throat would close up. It was a heaviness in his chest, a mixture of anger and disappointment, but above all, an overwhelming urge to protect. It wasn't heroism or rashness, just a deep certainty that he couldn't abandon Sofia the way everyone else already had. The phone never stopped ringing. Important people wanting to talk, a counselor throwing laws and risks in his face, his sister calling him crazy, his nephew warning him to be careful. Over and over, they reminded him, you could lose everything: credibility, contracts, respect. As if any of that was worth more than looking into the eyes of that girl. Hugo started to feel a strange pride in going against the tide, because if it took courage to let a child into your life, it was far greater cowardice to leave another one behind. The first time Hugo heard Sofia crying softly in her bedroom, it felt almost like physical pain. He waited for her to calm down, stood motionless in the dark hallway with his forehead pressed to the wall. He thought of his own son, of a God he wasn't sure he believed in anymore, and wondered if this was what taking care of someone meant: feeling another's pain inside your own body. Over time, he started ignoring the newspapers and warnings. He ate breakfast with Sofia in silence, listening only to the rain tapping the window pane. The table was always full of choices, but she ate slowly, as if apologizing for every spoonful. One morning, he placed his hand over hers, steady, as if saying, "Stay." Sofia trembled and then smiled just with her eyes, a small flicker. It was almost like asking permission to exist there. His courage grew, almost as much as his fear. Once, exhausted by all the criticism, Hugo stopped at Sofia's door before bed. She was drawing something crooked on a piece of bread paper, the teddy bear lying droopy beside her. Hugo knelt, got down to her eye level, and said plainly, his voice low and nearly breaking, "Listen, it doesn't matter what they say. You came into my life. You chose me. I think that's what was missing. And no one is going to take that from us, Sofia. No one." There was a tense silence, the sort TV never quite gets right. All that existed was the air, the quiet scratch of pencil on paper, and her uneven breathing. Sofia looked at him, took a moment. Then, like a child mustering courage, she scooted closer and hugged Hugo around the neck, tight. The teddy bear fell to the floor. Hugo closed his eyes, let his hand rest on her back. He breathed in the smell of cheap shampoo mixed with rain and city streets. He almost cried, but swallowed it down. This time, it wasn't sadness. It was a small hope, but a strong one. No matter how much other people's opinions crashed like blows, Hugo decided in that moment that he wasn't going to hold back anymore. He would do everything he could, come what may, with or without the approval of those who'd never looked into the eyes of a lost child. They could say what they wanted, storm or no storm. He just wasn't going to let go of that hug. That night, for the first time, Sofia fell asleep with her head on the pillow without crying so much. Hugo sat at the edge of her bed, watching her breathe, listening to the soft sound of the promise she should have heard her whole life. You're not going to be alone anymore. And the voices outside grew less and less important. Inside, it was just the two of them against the whole world. In those first days, everything was still so strange to Sofia. The quiet of the big house was nothing like the cold silence of the street. It wasn't the hush of fear, of people passing by without seeing her. This silence was full of good smells, the soft ticking of a wall clock, the distant hum of the fridge. It was a new silence, and it took her a while to trust it. At their first meals together, Sofia didn't quite know how to behave. She sat staring at her plate, not touching the utensils, just clutching the battered bear in her lap. Sometimes, she'd sneak glances at Hugo, side-eyed, as if waiting for a shock or a shout. But the outburst never came. Just more fresh bread, more juice, more patience. Hugo didn't say much. Sometimes he seemed just as awkward, as if he were relearning his own movements, figuring out how to look at a child without seeming stern or distant. He watched Sofia pick up her food with careful fingers, carry it slowly to her mouth, chewing as if unsure she was allowed to swallow so much abundance. Every time, a lump formed in Hugo's throat. He wondered silently just how much suffering could fit inside such a little girl. Days passed at that slow, almost Sunday-like pace. On the third morning, Sofia worked up the courage to draw. She borrowed colored pencils, grabbed a new notebook, crisp, clean pages, and sat for hours at the table. Her first drawing was just wonky lines, no color. The second had a sky, though the sun was a little sad. When Hugo saw, he paused beside her, careful not to startle her. He didn't gush, didn't want to scare her with too much praise. He just smiled and said, "That's nice." Sofia shrugged, but her heart beat faster. It felt good not to be ignored for the first time in so long. One day, the weather changed suddenly. A heavy rainstorm swept through the afternoon, thick clouds rolling in and washing the streets. On days like that, it was easy to miss nothing at all. Sofia watched the water slide down the glass, listened to the raindrops drumming the roof and the distant sound of cars speeding home to escape the storm. Part of her wanted to curl up deep inside the teddy bear, chased by the old fear of thunder from nights spent alone under the eaves. She didn't say anything, but Hugo noticed her gaze growing lower, more distant. Then, just like that, the rain cleared as quickly as it came. The sky opened up, and through the window, Sofia saw a huge rainbow arching over the distant buildings. She couldn't help but stare. She pressed her face against the cold window glass, held her breath, didn't even blink. Hugo was at the table, fiddling with his laptop, but he saw the scene, the little girl with her wide eyes, forehead against the glass. He walked over, stood quietly beside her, letting her have her moment. Sofia stood like that for ages, gazing at the colors, clutching the old teddy close to her chest. She didn't even notice she was smiling. It was a shy, small smile, but so honest. The kind that lights up a whole face. It wasn't the forced gratitude she used when somebody tossed her spare change, nor the fake smile to beg for coins. It was the pure, weightless smile of a child, delighted and surprised by the world. Hugo felt a fresh wave stir in his chest, but he didn't want to rush her. His eyes filled with tears. He didn't quite know why it moved him so deeply. Sofia glanced sideways, saw him standing there. She grew a little self-conscious, tried to smooth her face back to seriousness, but couldn't. The smile broke out of her anyway, the same way rainbows break free of the sky after the rain. Hugo whispered, "It's beautiful, isn't it?" She quickly nodded, embarrassed, but with a quiet sense that maybe she was finally allowed to be happy about something. From that day on, things changed. Breakfast became a little less silent. Sofia started asking questions, telling stories about a dog she'd seen on the street or a cartoon she remembered from school. Hugo relearned what it meant to have a child nearby. He rummaged through his memory for songs and old stories, trying not to let heavy pain ruin this fragile piece. He wanted everything here to be light, a chance to fix something inside himself. One afternoon he brought out paper, glue, a pile of old magazines. He sat on the floor with her, set his business suit aside, let the meetings wait. They cut out pictures together and made a collage on the wall. Sofia giggled when he glued his own finger to the paper, and Hugo realized her little laugh had a power none of his boardroom victories could ever match. They started walking around the block. At first, Hugo was tense, nervous about exposing Sofia to the world, afraid of sideways looks or neighborhood whispers. But with each step, he felt less shame, more desire to show everyone that this, the two of them, learning how to be family, was the best thing that could have happened. Sofia watched the people around them, but now she gripped his hand tight, trying to trust that the ground wouldn't vanish from under her feet anymore. The fear never vanished entirely. At night, she still woke from nightmares, sometimes sitting on the bed for hours, listening to the house sounds while hugging the teddy bear. But now she realized that, whenever she needed, Hugo would come in quietly and just sit at the edge of her bed, no questions asked. That was enough. Silence, with him there, felt different. It felt safe. The morning after the rainbow, Sofia woke before sunrise. She looked out the window and saw the sky growing light. She grabbed some paper, drew a colorful rainbow, and wrote a little note just for him. "Thank you for letting me see the sky from here." She left the paper on the table, alongside the teddy bear, and went to make herself some breakfast. When Hugo found the note, he couldn't stop himself from crying. He picked up the paper, hugged Sofia, and whispered that nobody would ever steal her sky again. In that instant, he understood. Sofia's smile might just be the cure for everything that had been missing from his heart. It was only the beginning, but he knew. The two of them were finally relearning how to smile together. The day started with a different scent in the house, almost a trace of cake in the air, a detail Sofia picked up even if she wasn't sure what to expect. She was a mix of nerves and curiosity from the moment she woke up and sat on that warm bed, the same one she still wasn't fully used to sleeping in. But it was soft and smelled clean, fresh. It was strange, but in a nice way, like those moments she would bathe with her mother, hot water running over her in winter. In the hallway, the floor seemed shinier than usual, and, even if she didn't know why, Sofia noticed a different silence. It was like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for a surprise alongside her. Hugo appeared in the doorway, the corners of his eyes brighter than usual. He was holding a small box wrapped in yellow paper, decorated with balloons and stars. When he knelt down to speak to her, smiling shyly, Sofia half expected she'd done something wrong. But it wasn't scolding or a lesson. He just said softly, "Come with me." And Sofia went, slowly dragging her battered teddy by the arm, not knowing where this walk through her new house would lead. Her feet were cold, but her heart was beating fast. The smell of cake grew stronger, and she realized someone had put on gentle music, the sort of thing that only plays in happy houses. Or at least that's what she liked to imagine as she listened. Hugo stopped outside a door and drew out the suspense like a magician before the big reveal. "Close your eyes, Sofia," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. She hesitated, looked at him, then closed just one eye, almost in play, but deep down afraid of hoping too much. With his hand, Hugo gently pushed the door open, and at once the smell of fresh paint mixed with the scent of new paper, something of a child's room just finished. He took her hand, gentle as if holding a calm bird, and led Sofia inside. When she opened her eyes, she froze. The room was so much bigger than the corner where she used to sleep in the city center, covered in cardboard, the bear hugged to her chest. Here there was a bed just for her, with pink sheets covered in teddy bears, just like the ones she used to see in store windows, but never even dared touch. There was a low bookcase stuffed with colorful books, plush animals lined up side by side, all seeming to smile at her. Soft carpet underfoot. A wardrobe with doors she could open and close without anyone getting angry. Drawings taped to the wall. Hugo would later explain he'd hung them himself, not very neatly. There were rainbows, flowers, and even a sketch of her favorite teddy, copied from the real thing, with a lopsided ear just like hers. Sofia stood stiff, unable to move her hands. Hugo was watching, breath held, hoping it was all good enough for her. The silence was thick until she took a step, almost as if she expected the floor to disappear. She ran to the bed, buried her face in the pillows, and let herself cry. It wasn't sadness. It was the kind of weeping that happens when you get something you always thought belonged to someone else. She cried so softly almost nobody would notice, but Hugo saw. He sat carefully beside the bed, his suit wrinkling on the mattress, and just stayed there, not saying a word. Sofia hugged her old teddy tight and looked at Hugo, wide-eyed, hardly believing it. She let out a shaky laugh, a mix of embarrassment and joy. She asked in a tiny voice, "Is it really for me? Can I choose to sleep here every day?" Hugo, after years of not knowing how to really smile, managed a genuine grin and nodded. "It's yours. You can choose whatever you want. You can even leave your toys all over if you want." Sofia threw herself down on the rug, looking at everything. She touched the books without fear, reached out for the wallpaper, discovered a brand new box of colored pencils on the shelf, the kind she'd only ever seen in grocery stores. She almost lost her breath when she realized there was a drawer just for her in the wardrobe, and a music box inside. She sat back on the bed, hugged a pillow, and looked at Hugo as if he'd given her the whole sky. All she could say was, "I never had anything like this. Not even when Mom was. Not even when I was little." Her voice was tiny, almost hidden behind her tears. Hugo looked at Sofia as if she were a secret, almost breaking him apart. He saw a girl who wanted so little, just her own space. He felt his chest ache in a good way, so different from the emptiness he'd carried for years. He thought of the son he couldn't save, and for a moment, he felt that maybe, here, he could fix a part of his past. Sofia wandered about the room, opening and closing the wardrobe, testing every pillow. She worked up the courage to make a mess, to see if she really could, and nobody would yell. When she knocked over a toy and nothing happened, she smiled in disbelief. Later, when her tears dried, she went to the window. The sun had come out after the rain, a beam shining in the corner of the room, lighting up the row of stuffed animals. These small details, the sunlight, the gentle quiet, the smell of cake baking, made Sofia think that maybe, finally, she could have a real family. Later that day, Hugo came back with a slice of cake in a bright little bowl, topped with a lit candle. He sang happy birthday softly, off-key, and Sofia blew out the candle laughing. When she hugged Hugo tight, their hearts met, as if each completed what the other lacked. She thought of the old note, that desperate wish for a hug. She looked at the pocket of her pajamas and realized she didn't have to ask anymore. The hug was always there now, and for the first time, she believed it was possible to build a home from nothing, even after everything. Even if she was just a little girl with an old bear and a wide-open heart. In the beginning, nobody really knew what Hugo was up to. He spent hours at his desk, surrounded by papers, frowning into the phone, asking about laws, projects, budgets. People nearby whispered, "Since when does that cold man care about the streets?" They'd see him gazing out the window, lost. But to him, it all made sense. It was as if the hole inside his chest was finally filling with a new purpose. Sofia would watch. Sometimes, she'd creep into the office, peeking in. The bear, always at her side. She saw how Hugo's expression had changed. He didn't seem so distant anymore. Now and then, he'd smile a little when he saw her doodles left on the desk. "Did you draw this?" She'd answer slowly, and he'd reply with that uncertain air of someone learning how to talk again. At first, the idea for the institute seemed impossible. Meeting after meeting. Paperwork, lines of lawyers, people telling him he was crazy. Why spend all that money on street kids? But every time he felt like giving up, he remembered finding Sofia in the hallway, skidding her socks across the rug, remembering how he'd found her, small, wet-haired, the note on the window. Her pain, big enough to swallow the world. He'd promised her, and himself, that he'd never ignore a hurting child again. The project came off the paper. Hugo took Sofia to see the first building, old, half-collapsed, but with a big sunlit area, cracked tile floors, tall windows. She walked quietly, looking at everything. "Is this where we help other kids like me?" she asked, her voice low, but hopeful. He knelt, looked into her eyes. "We are, sweetheart, and you're going to help me. Nobody better to care for them than someone who's been through it all." It rained the first week of renovations. The city pressed on, gray, traffic, horns, rush. But inside, it was beautiful chaos, hammers banging, sacks of cement moving, walls being painted. Sofia and Hugo stopped by every day, even getting her new shoes dirty, and she helped pick the colors for the doors. "This blue is happy. It has to be happy, so no one's scared here." When the institute finally opened, it was simple. No fancy party. Just hot coffee, bread, a small cake. Hugo was nervous as a kid, fidgeting with his suit, his hands sweaty. Sofia held tight to her bear and a squished flower she'd found on the way. There were a handful of kids sitting, wary. Nobody speaking loudly, just the sounds of the city drifting in through the windows. Suddenly, a little girl looked over at Sofia. "Hi." That weak voice reminded Sofia of herself, months before. She stepped over, careful not to scare anyone. Sat down beside her, smiling. She'd listen first, then ask if everything was okay. When the other girl started crying softly, Sofia didn't even think. She hugged her. Hugged her the way she'd wished someone would hug her on cold nights when fear just wouldn't end. Hugo watched from a distance, his eyes red with emotion. He had to swallow hard. This was something money would never teach him. It took precision, gentleness. Sofia seemed to know just when to reach out, when to stay quiet, when to make someone giggle and bring laughter back. And somehow, everyone there started opening up. A boy rested his head on her shoulder. Another girl offered her a drawing. Tiny gestures, meaningless to some, but for those who've learned not to trust, it's the start of a new kind of world. Over the next weeks, Sofia became something like a big sister to the others. She ran through the halls in worn sandals, laughing out loud. She'd call over anyone standing back, offer a piece of bread, drag them into a soccer game. And above all, she listened. Sometimes, Hugo would watch from afar, a misty eye, swelling with that pride only a parent feels when they watch their child triumph over their own story. One evening, as night fell, Sofia sat on the garden bench, watching the sky darken. She hugged her bear, now scrubbed clean, smelling of fabric softener. Kids were scattered around, some laughing, others quietly nearby. The cold wind brushed through her hair, and she remembered her days on the street, the chill down to the bone, the hunger, the fear. But suddenly, she felt something different, as if her chest had grown warmer. And she thought quietly that maybe this was a kind of miracle, to have gone through pain and still choose to trust. To share a hug, even when the world outside is still scary. The sadness hadn't gone, but now, she could breathe. When Hugo came over, he sat beside her without a word, just put his arm gently over her shoulders. They sat there for a while, watching the streetlights flicker on, listening to the distant noise of cars. They didn't need to talk. In the silence was the weight of everything they'd been through, and the hope of everything still to come. He looked at her, teary-eyed. Deep down, he knew it wasn't just Sofia who was being reborn. He had found a new beginning, too. And together, they weren't just two lost souls anymore. Now, they'd help others find a path, even when it rained. The sky did nothing to hide everyone's emotions that day. A wet gray covered the courthouse, a cold wind blowing around the feet of those waiting outside. Even so, right at the door, Sofia and Hugo stood together, breathing in unison, holding hands tight, the way only people who know what it is to be lost can understand. Sofia woke early. She hardly slept, to tell the truth. Her mind swirled with anxious thoughts. Maybe this is all a dream? Maybe someone will send her back to the street? The smell of coffee brewing in Hugo's house floated through the halls, but she didn't touch it. Her stomach was knotted with nerves and hope. Hugo came down the stairs slowly. The suit he picked wasn't as expensive as before. It was comfortable, plain, a little crumpled at the shoulders, marked by too many hugs. His face, well, his face gave away what years of money and power could never hide. He was nervous, sure, but each time he looked at Sofia, calm washed over him. It was as if the whole world only made sense right there. That small hand nestled in his. Inside the courthouse, it was cold. High walls, people in a hurry, children crying quietly, lawyers rushing about with papers, the sharp clack of heels and staff voices echoing. Sofia clutched her old teddy to her chest, the same one she'd had on the street. Hugo stroked her hand with his thumb, saying nothing, just letting her know, through touch, that everything would be all right. The judge entered the room, hair pulled back, stern, as if she'd heard too many stories to be moved. But it barely took 5 minutes looking through Sofia's file and seeing the way she looked at Hugo for the judge's eyes to shine as well. She said a few simple words, asked if this was what they wanted, if they both wanted to be a family. Sofia almost couldn't answer, her throat tight with emotion. She just nodded. Hugo replied yes in a low voice, but the whole room felt the weight of it. It was a yes full of old pain and new hope. At the end, the judge signed the papers, smiled, and wished them luck. Sofia, right there, made her new last name official, the one that seemed like it belonged only to distant, fancy people before. Now it was hers, too. Outside, the street was waiting. A cluster of reporters crowded the sidewalk, cameras at the ready, mics on. They were there for the story, the city's richest man adopting a girl from the street. In the middle of so much sophistication, a single umbrella held out against the fine drizzle, flashes starting to burst. Hugo knelt down in front of Sofia, right at her level. It was strange, all those eyes watching, but for that moment it might as well have been just the two of them. He scooped her into his arms, gentle and strong, lifted her just slightly off the ground. Sofia clung to his neck, and for the first time that day, she let her tears fall. Not from fear. It was pure relief, like someone who'd waited so long to never be alone again. A photographer got too close, and one of Hugo's people asked for space, but he didn't care. He pressed Sofia to his chest, breathed deep, feeling those small hands reaching places even he couldn't explain. And you'll always remember the way Hugo looked at the crowd, eyes shining, cheeks flushed, mouth trembling, as if he were learning how to live again. And in the middle of that embrace, tight, honest, he said it out loud, with emotion, without shame and without fear of being judged. She's rescued me far more than I ever rescued her. Once, people saw a successful man, cold, almost untouchable. But there, with Sofia clinging to his neck, anyone who looked could see the opposite, a father. Fragile, emotional, learning how to love. You could hear the frantic clicks of cameras, reporters whispering, people around thinking it was all too beautiful to be true. Plenty turned up their noses, threw hard questions, eyed him with suspicion. But Hugo didn't flinch. For the first time, Sofia didn't try to hide from the noise, didn't shield her face. She smiled, that shy little smile of someone who deserves the whole world but only wants a lap to call her own. Amidst the flashes and all that murmuring, it felt like the world stopped for a moment. The chilly air now carried the scent of wet asphalt, the distant sound of car horns, and still, nothing could dull the light in their eyes. The courthouse staff, people who'd seen 1,000 stories end badly, stood by the window. Some hid their emotions, others wiped their eyes. On the sidewalk, gradually, people began to clap softly, timidly. Hugo turned, still holding Sofia in his arms, and nodded his thanks. The girl clutched her stuffed bear, now almost as much a part of the family as she was. Inside, Sofia felt a tangle of joy and fear, but the fear was smaller now. Her heart beat fast, but it was warm. Hugo felt it too, a warmth not born of money or fame. It came from that near miracle of being chosen, of being wanted, of finally being able to call someone daughter, someone father. And there, in front of everyone, with or without rain, their embrace became a promise. A promise that neither of them would ever go hungry for affection, for care, for hope again. If you looked closely, you'd see it in their eyes, a new beginning no one could steal. It was only the start. Sofia's laughter cut through the morning air, mingling with the smell of fresh coffee wafting from the kitchen. She'd sit at the tall counter, little legs swinging, her nose nearly dipped into a mug of hot chocolate and buttered bread. Her old stuffed bear, now sporting a new t-shirt, sat glued by her side, paying attention to every word as if it understood. Outside, on the sidewalk near the new institute, the world seemed different. Kids of all ages arrived, some already smiling, others only able to lift their gaze a little, wary, just as Sofia had been at the start. But the huge windows let the light flood in, spreading bit by bit, even into the corners of the soul that once were dark. Hugo paced the hallway, thoughtful, carrying 2 mugs of tea. He'd drift off in thought, especially when he spotted a doodle on the wall like the one he'd found that first day on the car window. Sweat on his brow as he picked up scattered toys, a crooked smile on his lips. He'd learned about messes now, about lost toys, about tight hugs. His expensive suits were no longer daily attire. Most days he wore a battered t-shirt, jeans, not caring if the collar got creased. In a corner of the courtyard, Sofia raced with the other kids, hair flying, loud and happy. She only turned around when she realized she no longer felt the old fear. It hardly visited anymore, but sometimes it still hovered. When it did, she'd look for Hugo with her eyes. Always found him. He'd be there, sitting on a bench, chatting with a volunteer, always watching. It'd only take a glance, and he'd know. He'd flash that shy smile, stretch out his arms. She'd run over, leap into his lap, and he'd hold her like he'd never let her go. Now, the Institute was home to dozens of other Sofias, each with their own ways, their own silences, their unspoken questions. Some nights, rain hammered the roof, thunder rattled the windows. Sofia would curl up in her new bed, hugging her teddy. But now, someone always knocked softly at the door. Hugo would come in, sit beside her, rest his hand on her forehead, and murmur, "It's okay." Sometimes he was afraid, too, but he'd learned from Sofia not to hide those feelings anymore. He'd hold her tight. The silence between them was peace. That Sofia alone with her note felt like a distant, though never forgotten, memory. Sometimes, she'd pull Hugo by the hand out onto the sidewalk, just to feel the wind in her face like she used to on the bad nights. She'd close her eyes and breathe deep. I never thought I'd have a home again, Dad. When she called Hugo Dad, his chest warmed, throat tight. He'd pretend to play, ruffle her hair, but inside, he prayed to keep that miracle alive every day. Every week, the Institute welcomed new children. Some arrived wary, silent, even lugging bags of cans, exactly like Sofia once had. She herself would greet them at the gate, holding the little ones' hands, showing them around, pointing out the kitchen, promising that here, bread never runs out, no one sleeps in the cold. Hugo's pride would shine, even when no one noticed. He'd watch from a distance, eyes glossy, remembering the hole left in his chest when he lost his own son, the blind pride, the fear of feeling. Now, he felt everything, always. By late afternoon, the courtyard would be full. Kids playing, running, some just sitting, gazing at the sky. Sometimes, Sofia would sit on the steps beside her father. They'd talk quietly about dreams. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Hugo asked. "I want to be like the lady who bakes cakes, or like you, who never lets anyone stay sad." Hugo laughed, gave her a sideways hug. "Deal. But I also want you to just be Sofia too." The day of the official opening finally came. There were colored banners, balloons stuck to the walls, everyone buzzing. Reporters, photographers, curious neighbors. Sofia wore a simple white dress and held Hugo's hand tight. On the makeshift stage, someone gave a speech, said thank you. No one really listened. They were all waiting for their moment. Hugo took the microphone, voice trembling, unpracticed in talking about himself. He glanced at Sofia, saw her smile, eyes shining, the old teddy clutched to her chest. "I thought I'd lost everything. I thought I'd never feel hope or joy again. But," he looked at Sofia, voice catching, "she showed me there's always room for one more hug, even for those who think their heart's gone dry." It wasn't a speech, more of a whisper, but it echoed. The crowd understood. Tears dotted the hall, some hiding them, some not. Hugo and Sofia embraced as if time had stopped, as if the world could never come between them again. Right there, in front of everyone, it was clear they were no longer a street girl and a hollow man. They were family. That day, Sofia understood a miracle isn't something out of a movie. It's made of people, of small gestures, of courage to ask for hugs and humility to accept them. She was never hungry again, not for food or for love. Hugo, with her by his side, never again felt the chill of loneliness. The Institute filled with new laughter, new stories, and together, they showed that sadness can turn into dreams, fear into an embrace, and even abandonment into a home. The sun was already sinking when the last group of kids came bouncing through the door. Sofia climbed into her father's lap, Teddy hugged to her chest. He kissed her forehead, eyes squeezed shut to keep from crying. For a moment, they said nothing, listening to the joyful sounds of laughter, a sound that, once, had only been silence. And right there, in that crowded room, smelling of cake, promise, and so much hope, they truly began a new chapter.